Today in kindergarten, we're doing another lesson in our mini self-control unit, and today it's going to be about voice volume. As a refresher, we talk about self-control, being in control of your body, your words, and your volume and your attention. Again, we recognize there's variability due to neurodivergence and other disabilities, but we are doing a Tier 1 instruction lesson on voice volume and different voice levels that we use in different settings. And again, we review our strategies for what you can do if you're distracted, if somebody around you is distracted, so you can redirect your attention and you can be in control of it. You look at the speaker, you can say the words to yourself in your mind, so you can actually say tap, clap, snap, tap, clap, snap. You can picture the words in your mind too. If somebody next to you is in your space or they're distracting you, you can move to a new space, you can turn your body to set yourself up for success. Then once we get started, I have a story that I read to them, and I always start off by reading it with a whisper voice, and then they can't hear me. So then, of course, I address it. I say, oh, you can't hear me. I'm not using the right voice volume, and I adjust. The story we read is from my kindergarten self-control unit, and it's called Just Right Voice Volume, and it's about a girl who arrives at school. Her class is doing mindfulness time. She comes in yelling, startles everyone, and then it's time for calendar time, and someone is whispering, so their teacher gives them a little reminder about voice volume, and we talk about how your voice is kind of like a remote control. You can turn the volume up and you can turn the volume down. So we practice these voice volumes. 0 is silent. That's like when we're in line, walking through the hall, going on a fire drill or something like that. Then we have our whisper voices. We have our shaka voice. So let me show you what that looks like. To make a shaka, we're in Hawaii. So say you put your thumb on your chin and your pinky is sticking out, and that's about the distance that your voice needs to travel. So if you're in a really small group with someone, your voice doesn't have to travel very far. So you can use your shaka voice. You don't need to shout so they can hear you across the room, and you don't have to whisper because you can still talk to them in a regular voice, but your voice isn't traveling very far. We talk about our speaker voice when you're presenting to other people or you need everyone in the room to hear you, and then we have our outside voice when we can be a little bit louder. And to demonstrate the distance, I ask a student volunteer to stand with me. We stand really close together, and I whisper and I say, can you hear me? And then they say yes, and then we take a step back, and we keep going until they can't hear me with my whisper voice, and then I use my number 1 voice, my whisper voice, my number 2 voice, my shaka voice, and then my number 3 voice, my speaker voice, and number 4, my outside voice. Then we just practice. They move around the room. I call out a voice volume, and I use that with the person next to them, or I call on one person to demonstrate the voice, depending on the voice volume that we're using. Then just really simple wrap up. I have this little page for them where they can draw a line to match the voice volume to the appropriate setting. This is a great activity in kindergarten because we're often using the wrong volume of voice in the wrong setting. And we can also talk about how when we're outside, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use an outside voice. We can still use our shaka voice or our strong speaker voice depending on what we're doing. People can still hear us, so we don't have to shout just because we're outside.